Clara Whitmore was 22 years old when she knelt in the dirt of a cold New Mexico stable and made a decision that cost her almost everything she owned. The stranger in front of her had been beaten so badly that one side of his face was swollen purple. Blood had dried along his temple. His coat was torn. His left arm hung at an angle that made Clara's stomach tighten every time she looked at it. Behind her, Silas Mercer raised his rifle. "Step away from him, Clara." Silas did not shout. He did not need to. The ranch owner had spent enough years giving orders that even his quiet voice carried across the stable like the crack of a whip. Clara tightened both hands around the heavy water bucket. Outside, the November wind dragged dust across the hard ground of the Double Bar Ranch. The drought had lasted nearly 9 months. Water holes were shrinking. Cattle were growing thin. Tempers had become shorter with every cloudless week. Silas Mercer had become harder than the land itself. He was 54 broad through the shoulders, gray beginning to show in his beard, with deep lines around his mouth and eyes. He had built the Double Bar into one of the largest cattle spreads in Red Mesa Valley, and he considered everything within its fences to belong to him. The cattle, the water, the bunkhouses, the horses, and sometimes the people. Wade Brannon, the ranch foreman, stood several feet behind him, holding a kerosene lantern. Wade was 41 tall and raw-boned, with a permanent sneer that made him look amused by other people's pain. The lantern threw a yellow circle of light across the stranger's face. Clara looked down at him. He appeared to be around 38, perhaps 40. It was difficult to tell beneath the dirt, bruising, and dried blood. He had stumbled onto the property less than an hour earlier. One of the hands had found him near the cattle trough, barely conscious, his clothes covered with road dust and dried mud. Nobody knew where he had come from. Nobody knew who had beaten him. Nobody knew why. Silas had decided those were 3 excellent reasons to throw him back outside. "He's hurt," Clara said. Her voice remained quiet. "His arm is broken. That cut needs cleaning. He needs water and a place out of the wind." "Not our concern," Wade said. Clara ignored him. "If you put him outside tonight, he may not see morning." Wade laughed. "We've got 80 head of cattle barely making it through this drought, and she's worried about some drifter who crawled out of a ditch." Clara dipped a strip of clean cotton into the bucket. Wade stepped closer. "We're not wasting clean water, good bandages, and whiskey on a man who brought trouble to our door." Silas lowered the rifle slightly. "Wade's right." Clara turned toward him. Silas's expression was hard. "Look at that man. Somebody nearly killed him. Men don't get beaten like that for no reason." "Sometimes they do." "Not on my land." Silas nodded toward the stranger. "If the men who did this come looking for him, then his trouble becomes my trouble. I have a ranch to protect." Clara understood fear. Everyone living in Red Mesa Valley understood fear. It was 1874, and this part of New Mexico territory was a long way from anything resembling civilization. The nearest federal marshal spent more time traveling between towns than sitting behind a desk. Rustlers moved through the hills. Desperate men robbed stagecoaches. Cattle disappeared. People disappeared too. But none of that changed what Clara saw in front of her. A wounded man, breathing, bleeding, alive. "I'll use my own water," she said. "I'll use the bandages I bought in town last spring. He can stay in the stable. He doesn't need a bed." Silas's jaw tightened. "You'll do no such thing." Clara wrung the water from the cloth. "I'll sit here with him." "Clara!" She lowered herself onto one knee. Silas took a step forward. His boots struck the packed dirt floor. "I give the orders here." Clara pressed the damp cloth against the stranger's forehead. The man flinched. His eyes remained closed. Silas's voice hardened. "I'm telling you to leave him alone. At sunrise, Wade will put him in a wagon and leave him near the South Road. That road is 12 miles from town. Then he better be good at walking." Clara continued cleaning the blood. Clara. She looked up this time. Silas pointed toward her with one hand while holding the rifle in the other. Did you hear me? Yes, Mr. Mercer. And Clara swallowed. I can't do it. Wade gave a short laugh. Well, would you look at that? He leaned against a post. The hired girl thinks she's some kind of saint. Clara felt heat rise into her cheeks. She kept working. She had lived at Double Bar for 4 years. After her grandfather died, Silas had offered her a place in the loft above the kitchen storage room and 2 meals a day in exchange for work. Clara had accepted because she had nowhere else to go. She milked cows before sunrise. She cooked, she mended clothes, she repaired broken fence rails, she carried firewood, she helped with calves in the spring and rode fence lines when the ranch was short-handed. She had learned how to make herself useful enough that no one could easily justify throwing her away. But useful was not the same as respected. Her grandfather had taught her that. Sergeant Thomas Whitmore had raised Clara after her parents died of fever when she was a child. He had served with Union forces in the New Mexico campaign during the Civil War. Clara had heard his stories beside the stove on winter nights. Not stories about glory, he hated those. His stories were about cold, fear, hungry horses, men bleeding into snow and frozen mud. During the fighting near Glorieta Pass, Thomas Whitmore and several soldiers had been ordered to retreat from an exposed position. A wagon filled with wounded men could not move fast enough. Thomas stayed behind with a small group. They defended the wagon until reinforcements reached them. He never called himself brave. Whenever Clara asked why he had stayed, his answer was always the same. A man's life is worth more than a patch of ground. And later, when she was older, he added something else. You do the decent thing when it's expensive, Clara. Anybody can be decent when it costs nothing. She heard his voice now. Inside the stable. Inside her own head. Clara began wrapping a clean bandage around the stranger's forehead. I've worked hard for you, Mr. Mercer, she said. I've never asked you for a day off. I've never taken anything that wasn't mine. Silas's face darkened. But I'm not going to watch a man die because helping him is inconvenient. Silence fell across the stable. Even Wade stopped smiling for a moment. Silas stared at Clara. Then he spoke very slowly. Touch that man one more time and you are finished here. Clara froze. Silas stepped closer. You understand me? She looked at the stranger's broken arm, then at the bucket, then at Silas. The wind moaned through gaps in the stable boards. Clara reached for 2 straight pieces of pine. Wade whistled under his breath. Clara placed one piece of wood carefully beside the stranger's injured arm. Silas's face became red. That's it! Clara did not stop. You're fired. Her fingers paused for less than a second. Silas turned toward the door. Pack your things. You're off Double Bar land by sunrise. Wade followed him, then looked back with a smile. Town's nearly 2 days on foot. Silas opened the stable door. Then she'd better start early. Clara looked up. Silas stopped at the threshold. You threw away 4 years of security for a stranger who probably won't remember your name. He shook his head. I hope it was worth it. The door slammed behind them. The stable became quiet. Clara remained on her knees. For several seconds she did nothing. Then her hands began to tremble. She closed her eyes. She had no savings, no family, no horse, no property, no home waiting in Red Mesa. She owned a few dresses, an old pair of boots, a wool blanket, and a silver locket that had belonged to her grandfather. That was almost everything. One tear escaped. Clara wiped it away with the back of her wrist. Then she looked at the stranger. This is going hurt, I know. Clara jerked backward. The man's eyes were open, clear blue, alert. Far too alert for someone who had seemed unconscious. He had heard everything. Clara stared at him. You were awake? Most of the time. His voice was deep rough from thirst and pain. You shouldn't have done that. Clara frowned. Done what? He took your home. He took my job. The stranger studied her. Clara adjusted the pine splints around his arm. My home is wherever I can stand without somebody telling me what kind of person I'm allowed to be. Something changed in the man's expression. Respect, perhaps, or surprise. Hold still. She pulled the cloth tight around the splint. His jaw clenched. He did not cry out. When she finished, Clara lifted a tin cup to his lips. Slowly. He drank. Some water ran down his beard. After several swallows, he leaned his head against the wooden post. His breathing became steadier. He looked at Clara's hands. They were red from cold, rough from years of work, and marked with small scars. What's your name? Clara. He nodded. Ethan. Ethan what? A faint smile touched his mouth. For tonight, Ethan is enough. Clara raised an eyebrow, but did not press him. You should sleep. So should you. I have a long walk tomorrow. Where will you go? Red Mesa. And after that? Clara shrugged. I can sew, cook, clean, handle horses. Keep books if the numbers aren't too complicated. Someone will need help. Ethan watched her for several seconds. Then he said, Your grandfather. Clara looked at him. You mentioned him. Thomas Whitmore. Ethan's expression changed. It happened so quickly, Clara almost missed it. His eyes sharpened. Sergeant Thomas Whitmore. Clara stopped moving. You knew of him. Ethan looked away. Maybe. Maybe? Tell me about him. Clara pulled her coat tighter around herself. He was the best man I ever knew. Ethan remained silent for a long time. Then he rested his head back against the post. Get some sleep, Clara. She frowned. I should keep watch. Sleep. There was something unexpectedly commanding in his tone. Then his voice softened. Morning is going to change more than you think. Clara almost laughed. She had just lost the only job she had. She could not imagine how morning could make things much stranger. She was wrong. At sunrise, pale orange light stretched across Red Mesa Valley. Clara woke on the stable floor with a stiff neck. For a moment she did not remember why she was there. Then she saw the empty place beside the post. The blanket was flattened. A blood-stained strip of cloth remained in the dirt. Ethan was gone. Clara sat upright. Ethan! No answer. She checked the stable. Nothing. He had disappeared sometime before dawn. A strange disappointment settled inside her. She told herself it was foolish. He was a stranger. She had never expected anything from him. Still, a part of her had hoped to say goodbye. Perhaps to know that he had survived. Instead, the man she had sacrificed her security for had vanished without a word. Clara slowly stood. She did not regret helping him. That surprised her. She had lost nearly everything, and yet, if the night began again, she knew she would make the same choice. Her grandfather would have been proud. For now, that had to be enough. She climbed the narrow ladder to the small loft where she slept. Packing took less than 10 minutes. 2 cotton dresses, 1 blouse, a second pair of stockings, worn leather boots, a thick wool blanket, a small sewing kit, her grandfather's Bible, and finally the most valuable thing she owned, a tarnished silver locket. Clara opened it. Inside was a faded photograph of Thomas Whitmore wearing his Union uniform. His expression was serious. His beard was neatly trimmed. Even in a photograph, his eyes looked kind. Clara closed the locket and put it into the inside pocket of her dress. Then she carried her canvas bag down the ladder. The morning air was bitterly cold. Silas stood on the porch of the main ranch house drinking coffee. Wade leaned beside him against the railing. When Clara crossed the yard, Silas called out, "Looks like your drifter abandoned you." Clara kept walking. Ran off before sunrise, Silas continued. Exactly what I expected. Wade laughed. You traded a roof for nothing. Clara did not answer. She reached the main gate. "Hold on." Wade came down from the porch. He moved in front of her. Clara stopped. "What? You owe the ranch for what you wasted last night." "I used my own bandages." "You used ranch water." Clara stared at him. "The well doesn't belong to you, Wade." His smile vanished. "Everything inside these fences belongs to Mr. Mercer." "Then send me a bill." She tried to walk around him. Wade grabbed the strap of her bag. Clara spun around. "Let go!" "We should make sure you aren't stealing anything." "I'm not." "Then you won't mind if I look." He pulled the bag toward himself. Clara tightened her grip. From the porch, Silas sounded irritated. "Leave her alone, Wade." Wade looked back. "She could have taken something." "She owns nothing worth stealing." Silas waved one hand. "Get her off my land." Wade released the bag. Then he leaned close enough that Clara smelled old tobacco on his breath. "Long road to Red Mesa." Clara said nothing. "Rustlers in those hills. Coyotes, too. Men worse than coyotes." His eyes moved over her face. "Better watch yourself." Clara lifted her chin. "I don't fear the road." She stepped closer. "And I don't fear you." For the first time, Wade's smile disappeared completely. Clara pushed open the gate. She walked onto the road. She did not look back. Red Mesa was almost 30 miles away. The road crossed open scrubland before winding through a series of low, rocky hills. By noon, the temperature had climbed. The same land that had been freezing before sunrise now reflected the sun like iron from a forge. Clara's throat became painfully dry. Silas had refused to let her take a ranch canteen. She walked with her head lowered, concentrating on one step at a time. She thought of her grandfather. Thomas Whitmore had taught her almost everything useful she knew. He taught her to read using a worn Bible and old newspapers. He taught her arithmetic with beans and coins. He taught her to saddle a horse, repair a roof, clean a wound, set a simple splint. Tell when a man was lying by watching what he did instead of listening to what he said. When Clara was 17, fever took him within 4 days. After his death, she had felt as though the center of the world had disappeared. Silas Mercer offered her work because Thomas had occasionally repaired fences for Double Bar. Clara had believed she was fortunate. 4 years later, she understood the difference between being given shelter and being given a home. Her grandfather used to tell her that too. A home is built with respect. He would point to the walls of their little cabin. "These boards aren't the home, Clara. They're just lumber. If a man has to live afraid inside his own walls, he's living in a cage." Clara smiled faintly. Maybe she had lost a roof. Maybe she had gained freedom. The thought gave her enough strength to keep walking. Then she heard hoofbeats. Clara stopped. Dust rose along the road ahead. 2 riders approached quickly. As they came closer, Clara's hope disappeared. Wade Brannon rode the first horse. The second rider was Caleb Price, a 29-year-old ranch hand who had worked for Silas for nearly 3 years. Caleb was not cruel like Wade, but he was weak around men with authority. Sometimes that was nearly as dangerous. They pulled their horses across the narrow road. Wade rested his hands on the saddle horn. "Well," he pushed his hat back, "look who we found." Clara continued walking. Wade moved his horse sideways. "Need a ride?" "No, awfully hot." I said no. Caleb looked uncomfortable. "Clara, wait." She stopped. "What?" Caleb glanced toward Wade before speaking. "Mr. Mercer sent us." "For what?" "He says something may be missing from the office." Clara stared at him. "I have never been inside his office." Caleb rubbed the back of his neck. "He wants us to check your things." "That's a lie." Wade dismounted. A coiled leather whip hung from his saddle. He removed it. Clara's stomach tightened. Wade let the coil fall open in his hand. "I don't care whether you think it's a lie." Clara backed away one step. Then she understood. Her hand moved instinctively toward the pocket holding her grandfather's locket. Wade noticed. His eyes narrowed. "You don't want money." "What?" "You want the locket." Wade's expression became still. "You saw it months ago when I was cleaning it." Clara felt anger burn through her fear. "You aren't looking for something that belongs to Silas. You're looking for something you can sell." Caleb looked at Wade. "Wade, stay out of it." Clara's voice rose. "You're a thief!" Wade took one step toward her. "And you're getting too brave." "Because you pick on people who can't fight you." His face hardened. Clara continued. "That doesn't make you strong. It makes you a coward." Wade crossed the distance between them. "Give me the bag." "No!" He grabbed it. Clara pulled back. Wade yanked harder. She kicked him in the shin. He cursed. His open hand struck the side of Clara's face. The impact knocked her sideways. She fell against a patch of dry brush. For several seconds, sound became distant. Then pain spread across her cheek. She tasted blood. Wade emptied her bag onto the road. Her clothes fell into the dirt. Her Bible landed beside the blanket. Wade kicked the fabric aside. "Where is it?" Clara pushed herself upright. Caleb looked pale. "That's enough, Wade." Wade ignored him. He walked toward Clara. "Give it to me." "No." "Last chance." Clara's hand covered her pocket. Wade looked at the movement and smiled. "There it is." He reached for her. A rifle fired. The shot echoed through the valley. Wade froze. Caleb's horse reared. Caleb fought for control of the reins. Clara turned. 6 riders appeared on the road from the direction of Red Mesa. They came forward in disciplined formation. These were not ordinary cowboys. Their horses were large, well-fed Morgans. The riders wore long coats and carried sidearms. One man held a Winchester rifle pointed toward the sky, smoke drifting from the barrel. In the center rode a man on a black stallion. Clara narrowed her eyes against the sunlight. Her breath caught. It was Ethan. But it was not the Ethan she had left in the stable. The road dust was gone. His dark hair had been washed and combed neatly back. He was clean-shaven. His white shirt was crisp. A fitted charcoal vest sat beneath an expensive dark blue riding coat. His injured left arm rested in a clean sling. He sat straight in the saddle. There was no trace of the helpless drifter except the bruise near his forehead. And his eyes, those same clear blue eyes. "Drop the bag, Brannon." Wade stared. Ethan's voice was quiet, but every man on that road heard it. Wade looked confused. "You!" Ethan's expression did not change. "You take one more step toward her and you will regret it for the rest of your life." 2 riders beside Ethan drew their revolvers. Caleb immediately raised both hands. "I don't want trouble." Wade looked from the guns to Ethan. His face lost color. "You were the man in the stable." Ethan dismounted. He moved carefully because of his injured arm. The 6 riders remained where they were. Wade slowly dropped Clara's bag. Ethan walked past him without another glance. He stopped in front of Clara. His eyes went immediately to the cut on her lip. Something cold appeared in his expression. "Are you badly hurt?" Clara shook her head. "No." "Did he strike you?" "I'm all right. That wasn't my question." Clara looked at Wade. "Yes." Ethan inhaled slowly. Then he offered Clara his right hand. She took it. He helped her stand. Clara looked at his clothes, his horse, the armed men. "Ethan." He met her eyes. "Who are you?" One of the riders stepped forward. A broad-shouldered man with a silver deputy marshal badge attached to his coat spoke before Ethan could answer. "Ma'am, you're standing beside Ethan Hale." Clara said nothing. The man continued. "President of Hale Southwestern Rail and Cattle Company." Clara stared at Ethan. The name was known across the territory. Ethan Hale owned rail interests stretching from Colorado toward New Mexico and Arizona. His company controlled vast cattle herds. Banks in Santa Fe and Denver carried his investments. His father had built a freight business after the Civil War. Ethan had expanded it into rail cattle land and mining transport. Men like Silas Mercer complained about people like Ethan Hale while borrowing their money. Wade looked as if he might collapse. "Mr. Hale." Ethan turned. Wade removed his hat. "I didn't know." Ethan said nothing. Wade swallowed. "I swear to God, sir, I didn't know it was you." Ethan's expression hardened. "You didn't know my name?" "No, sir." "You didn't know how much land I owned?" "No." "Didn't know how much money I had?" "No, sir." Ethan stepped closer. "But you knew I was a man." Wade's mouth opened. Ethan continued. "You knew I was bleeding." Wade looked at the ground. "You knew my arm was broken." Silence. "And you still wanted to throw me into the cold." Ethan looked toward Clara. "She had even less power than you thought I had." His voice became colder. "And you struck her." Wade fell to one knee. "Mr. Hale, please." Ethan turned to the deputy marshal. "Deputy Foster." The man nodded. "Sir." "Arrest Wade Brannon for assault and attempted theft." Wade jerked upright. "Now wait!" Deputy Foster drew a pair of restraints from his saddlebag. Wade pointed toward Clara. "It's her word against mine." Caleb spoke quietly. "No." Everyone looked at him. Caleb swallowed. "I saw it." Wade stared at him. "Shut your mouth." Caleb shook his head. "You hit her. You dumped her things in the road. You were after that silver locket." Wade's face twisted. "You coward." Caleb looked miserable. "Maybe." Then he looked at Clara. "But I'm done helping you." Deputy Foster motioned to another man. They took Wade's weapons. Ethan looked at Caleb. "Did you touch her?" "No, sir." "Did you threaten her?" Caleb hesitated. "I blocked the road." "Why?" "Orders." Ethan's eyes narrowed. Caleb dropped his gaze. "That's not an excuse." "I know." "No, Mr. Price, it isn't." Ethan looked toward Deputy Foster. "Take his statement. If he cooperates fully, the law can decide the rest." Caleb nodded gratefully. Wade began protesting as the deputy tied his hands. Ethan ignored him. Instead, he knelt in the road. Clara blinked. "What are you doing?" "Picking up your things." "You don't need to." "I know." Using one hand, he gathered her clothing. He shook dust from the blanket, picked up the Bible. Then he stopped. He held the book for a moment. "Was this his?" Clara nodded. "My grandfather's." Ethan brushed the dirt carefully from the cover. He handed it to her. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For leaving before sunrise." Clara looked at him. "I had to reach my men in Red Mesa before Mercer's people realized who I was." He folded one of her dresses. Clara almost smiled at the sight of one of the wealthiest men in the territory kneeling in the road trying to fold a worn cotton dress with one functioning arm. "You are terrible at that." Ethan looked down. "At folding dresses?" "Yes." "I've had very little practice." Despite herself, Clara laughed. It hurt her split lip and she stopped. Ethan's expression darkened again. "That should not have happened. It's not your responsibility. In this case, I think some of it is." He returned everything to her bag. Clara accepted it. "Why were you dressed like that?" Ethan stood. "And why were you on Double Bar land?" His gaze moved toward the western hills. "Silas Mercer owes one of my banks a great deal of money." Clara listened. "He has missed payments for months. That alone wouldn't have brought me here." "What did cattle?" Clara frowned. "My cattle have been disappearing. Rustlers? I believe so." Ethan nodded toward the hills. "Several drives passing through Red Mesa Valley came up short. Always near the double-bar boundary. Clara remembered strange nighttime activity. Wade riding out after midnight. Unfamiliar brands in one of the distant corrals. Silas ordering ranch hands to stay away from the North Canyon. Her face changed. Ethan noticed. "You've seen something. I don't know. Tell me," Clara thought. "There is an old holding pen in Cottonwood Canyon." Silas told everyone it was abandoned. Ethan waited. "But twice last summer I saw Wade from that direction before sunrise." "With cattle?" "I heard cattle. I couldn't see them." Ethan nodded slowly. "I found the pen." Clara stared at him. "That's where you were hurt?" "Near it." Ethan glanced at Wade. "Mercer had unbranded and recently altered cattle hidden there. Some belonged to my company. Some carried brands from smaller outfits." Clara felt cold despite the heat. "Silas is a rustler, at best." "What does that mean?" "It means rustling may not be his only problem." Ethan looked back toward the men. "I entered his land dressed like a drifter because a man riding an expensive horse would have been noticed immediately. His men caught you." "3 of them." "Wade?" "No. Men I didn't recognize. I suspect Mercer used outside riders for the actual theft." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They questioned me. I gave them a false name. They beat me and left me in a dry wash." Clara's eyes widened. "How did you reach the ranch?" "Stubbornness. That isn't a medical treatment." "It's worked surprisingly well for me." Clara almost smiled. Ethan became serious again. "I knew Double Bar was nearby. I thought if I reached the main ranch house, I might find somebody willing to help." His eyes rested on her. "I found you." Clara glanced toward Wade, being placed on a horse. "What happens to Silas?" "His loan was already in default." Ethan paused. "This morning my attorneys completed foreclosure proceedings that Mercer had been warned about for months." Clara stared. "The ranch belongs to my company now." She looked toward the distant double-bar property. Ethan Hale had arrived at the stable with nothing but torn clothes. Less than a day later, he owned the land Silas Mercer had spent years treating like a private kingdom. A carriage appeared over the rise behind Ethan's men. Ethan nodded toward it. "You're going to Red Mesa?" Clara looked at him. "I am." "In the carriage?" "No." Ethan paused. Clara repeated herself. "No, thank you." "You've been walking for hours." "I can keep walking." "You have no water." "I'll manage." "Clara!" She straightened. "I helped you because you were injured." "I know. I didn't do it so a rich man would rescue me the next morning." Something like amusement entered Ethan's eyes. "I don't remember accusing you of that. I don't accept charity. It's a ride. It's a ride in a carriage that probably costs more than everything I've earned in 4 years." "Probably." Clara gave him a look. Ethan smiled. That smile surprised her more than the expensive clothes had. It transformed him. "I'm a worker," Clara said. "I'll find work in town." "I believe you." "I can take care of myself." "I believe that too." "Then stop looking at me as though I'm being unreasonable." "I was actually thinking you're exactly like him." Clara frowned. "Like who?" Ethan's smile faded. He reached carefully into his vest pocket. He removed a small wooden pipe. The wood was old and polished smooth with age. Clara stopped breathing for a moment. She recognized the shape. Her grandfather had owned one almost exactly like it, military issue, common during the war. Ethan held it in his palm. Sergeant Thomas Whitmore. Clara looked from the pipe to Ethan. "What about him?" Ethan's voice became quieter. "He saved my father's life." The road seemed suddenly silent. Even the wind had weakened. Clara held her bag against her chest. Ethan continued. "My father was Samuel Hale." Clara knew the name. Samuel Hale had founded the freight company Ethan inherited.
He was 19 during the New Mexico campaign.
Ethan looked at the pipe. He joined a Colorado volunteer regiment because he thought war sounded like an adventure. There was sadness in his expression. He discovered otherwise. Clara listened without moving. Near Glorieta Pass, he was shot through the shoulder. Not enough to kill him immediately, enough that he couldn't ride. Clara's fingers touched the pocket containing her locket. There was a wagon. Ethan looked up. You know the story. My grandfather told me some of it. The wagon held wounded men. Yes. Union forces were pulling back. Someone gave an order to abandon anything that slowed the retreat. Clara nodded slowly. Ethan continued. Your grandfather refused. Her throat tightened. He stayed with several other men. They kept a small fire burning. They defended the wagon. My father was losing blood and screaming from the pain. Ethan held up the pipe. Thomas Whitmore put this between his teeth and told him to bite down. Tears filled Clara's eyes. He kept it. My father kept it for the rest of his life. Ethan turned the pipe in his fingers. It sat on his desk when I was a boy. Clara remembered her grandfather sitting beside their stove. Thomas had never spoken about individuals from the wagon, never named people he saved. He would simply say, men needed help, so we helped them. Ethan continued. My father survived. His voice softened. He came home, married my mother, started hauling freight with 2 wagons and 3 tired horses. A faint smile appeared. He eventually built something larger. Much larger. Yes. Ethan looked across the valley. He never forgot Thomas. Clara wiped one tear from her cheek. My grandfather never said anything about Samuel Hale. That sounds like the Thomas Whitmore my father described. Ethan stepped closer. My father tried to find him after he had money. Clara listened. Records were poor. People moved constantly. By the time we located Thomas, he was already old. Ethan's expression tightened. Then I learned he had died. Clara looked down. 4 years ago. I know. She lifted her eyes quickly. Ethan met them. I also learned he had a granddaughter. Clara became still. A granddaughter named Clara Whitmore, who was working at Double Bar Ranch. Her heart began to beat harder. You knew I was here? Yes. You came here looking for me. That was one reason. Clara took a step back. Ethan sensed her discomfort. I wasn't planning to appear at your door and announce that my father owed your grandfather a debt. Then what were you planning to? I'm not entirely sure. He smiled slightly. I had several hours on the train to think about it. None of my plans were especially good. Clara folded her arms. That's comforting. I thought I might meet you. See how you were living? Learn whether there was anything you needed? Her expression hardened. Charity. No, it sounds like charity. It sounded like gratitude to me. I didn't save your father. No. And my grandfather never asked to be paid. No. Ethan looked at the road. Then last night happened. Clara said nothing. I arrived at Double Bar half dead. Mercer ordered you to leave me outside. His gaze returned to her. You didn't know my name. No. You didn't know my father. No. You didn't know I had money. No. You believed I was a penniless drifter. I did. And you helped anyway. Clara looked uncomfortable. Anyone should have. Anyone didn't. That silenced her. Ethan put the pipe into her hand. Clara closed her fingers around it. My father spent most of his life believing he owed Thomas Whitmore a debt he could never fully repay. Ethan's voice became quieter. Last night I finally understood what he meant. Clara looked at the pipe. For years she had believed her grandfather's kindness had vanished with him. Now she realized that an act performed in snow more than a decade before she was born had traveled through another man's entire life. It had reached his son, and somehow returned to Clara on a dusty road in New Mexico. Ethan continued. You don't want charity. No, I respect that. He pointed toward the double-bar land in the distance. So let's talk business. Clara narrowed her eyes. What business? The ranch. What about it? Mercer no longer owns it. You told me. I don't need another ranch in Red Mesa Valley. Clara stared at him. Ethan continued. I need someone to operate it. She laughed once. You have 6 armed men behind you. I'm sure one of them knows cattle. They work security. Then hire a ranch manager. I intend to. Something about his tone made Clara suspicious. Who? You. Clara stared at him. For several seconds, she genuinely believed she had misunderstood. I'm sorry. You know the land. I carried water and repaired fences. You know the cattle. I helped with cattle. You know the workers. Some of them. You know which men can be trusted. Clara opened her mouth. Ethan continued before she could interrupt. And after last night, I know you have something Silas Mercer never had. Money? Integrity. Clara shook her head. Ethan, I am 22 years old. Yes, I've never managed a ranch. Mercer did. Look where that got him. I don't have money. I do. I don't own cattle. I own too many. I don't even own a horse. We can solve that before supper. Clara looked at him in disbelief. You make everything sound simple. No, I make solvable problems sound solvable. He paused. There's a difference. Clara looked toward the hills. Even from here, she could imagine Double Bar. The stable, the main house, the south pasture, the shallow creek, the bunkhouse roof that leaked every spring. She knew which fence posts had rotted, which well produced the cleanest water, which cows would approach a person, and which ones would kick. She knew the land better than Silas did because Silas spent most of his time giving orders from the porch, but running the entire ranch, impossible. Ethan seemed to read her thoughts. I'm not asking you to know everything tomorrow. What are you asking? Come back. Clara said nothing. Work with an experienced cattle manager for the first year. Learn the books, learn contracts, learn payroll, learn purchasing. And after that, you decide. Decide what? Whether you want to keep running it. Clara frowned. You said you didn't need another ranch. I don't. He met her eyes. I'm transferring a controlling interest to you. Clara's mouth opened. No sound came out. Ethan continued. My attorneys can structure it properly. Ethan, you will own the land, subject to agreed operating terms, while Hale Cattle provides initial working capital. Ethan, you'll have authority over hiring and daily management. Ethan. He finally stopped. Clara stared at him. That's a ranch. Yes. Thousands of acres. Yes. You're giving me a ranch. I'm not giving you anything. What would you call it? A debt repaid? My grandfather saved your father because men were dying. And you saved me for the same reason. That still doesn't mean... No. Ethan's voice softened. It doesn't mean you're obligated to accept. Clara stopped. That was the first thing he had said that broke through her resistance. Ethan continued. If you don't want it, say no. She studied his face. No tricks? No. No hidden obligation? None. I don't owe you anything, not a cent. Clara looked down at the old pipe in her hand. My grandfather would say this is too much. Ethan smiled faintly. My father would say it isn't enough. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Clara looked toward the horizon. The valley was harsh, dry, unforgiving, and beautiful. It was the only place she had known as an adult. She thought of the ranch hands. Some were good men. Some had families. Some had remained silent while Silas treated workers badly because they needed wages. If she walked away, Ethan could sell the property. Someone worse than Silas might buy it. Or someone better. There was no way to know. Clara took a breath. If I say yes, I run it my way. Ethan nodded. Within the law, fair wages. Agreed. Clean bunkhouses. Reasonable. No stealing cattle. I was hoping you'd include that. Clara almost smiled. Workers get water before Silas's flower garden. Ethan laughed. Done. And no one gets thrown into the cold because they're poor. His smile disappeared. Especially that. Clara looked down at the pipe once more. Then she closed her fingers around it. All right. Ethan waited. All right, what? Clara sighed. All right, Mr. Hale. Call me Ethan. She shook her head. Don't push your luck. He laughed again. Then his expression became serious. I think we have an eviction to conduct. This time Clara accepted the carriage. She told herself it was because returning to Double Bar before sunset on foot was impossible. Ethan wisely did not argue. The carriage interior had padded seats covered in dark red fabric. Clara sat carefully, afraid her dusty clothes would ruin something. Ethan sat opposite her with legal documents spread across one knee. He noticed the way she was sitting. You aren't going to damage the seat. How do you know? It's survived railroad executives. What does that mean? They're considerably messier than cattle. Clara looked out the window to hide a smile. The ride back felt impossibly fast. Near sunset, the Double Bar gates came into view. The ranch looked different from inside Ethan Hale's carriage. Not smaller, but less frightening. Several trunks had been stacked on the main porch. Silas Mercer stood beside them, giving orders to two ranch hands. A telegram had reached him from Red Mesa. His loan had been called. The property had been foreclosed. He was no longer the owner. When Ethan's carriage rolled into the yard, Silas straightened his coat. He appeared to assume bank representatives had arrived. Then the door opened. Ethan stepped down. Silas went motionless. He stared at the tailored clothes, the sling, the face, the blue eyes. You. Ethan adjusted his coat with his good hand. Good afternoon, Mr. Mercer. Silas gripped the porch railing. You were. The man you wanted thrown into the cold. Ethan looked at him. Yes. Silas's eyes moved toward the armed riders entering behind the carriage. Confusion became fear. The telegram. Ethan waited. It said Ethan Hale bought the note. Correct. Silas's face became pale. You're Ethan Hale. I am. Silas descended the steps. Mr. Hale, I can explain. I'm sure you can. The cattle situation. Rustling. Silas swallowed. The drought ruined us. Rustling. Men were going to lose their jobs. Rustling. I was trying to keep Double Bar alive. By stealing from your neighbors? Silas looked toward the ranch hands, his voice lowered. We can discuss this privately. No. Ethan stepped forward. You conducted your cruelty publicly. We can discuss its consequences publicly too. Silas's jaw tightened. For a moment, the old arrogance returned. This land was mine for 18 years. Was. I built it. You mortgaged it. I survived droughts here. You stole cattle. Silas looked away. Ethan's voice became colder. You aimed a rifle at an injured man asking for water. I didn't know who you were. Ethan's expression hardened. There it is again. Silas looked confused. Ethan stepped closer. You think knowing my name would have changed what was right. Silas said nothing. It shouldn't have. The ranch yard became silent. Ethan nodded toward the trunks. Take what legally belongs to you. Silas glanced up. You have until dark. He swallowed. Then the ranch is yours. No. Silas frowned. Ethan turned toward the carriage. He extended his hand. Clara stepped down. The reaction on Silas Mercer's face was almost enough to stop every sound in the yard. He stared at her. Clara's cheek was swollen from Wade's blow. Her clothes were dusty. Her boots were worn. She still carried the same canvas bag, but she no longer lowered her eyes. "Clara," she stood beside Ethan. Silas looked between them. "What is this?" Ethan faced the workers gathering near the corral. "The Double Bar Ranch is being reorganized." Several men exchanged nervous looks. "Miss Clara Whitmore will hold the controlling ownership interest and serve as operating manager once the legal transfer is complete." Silas stared. Clara felt every eye in the yard turn toward her. Ethan continued, "Until then, she speaks with my full authority." One cowboy removed his hat. Another whispered something. Nobody laughed. Ethan raised his voice slightly. "Anyone who wants honest work for honest pay may remain." He looked across the yard. "Anyone who prefers Mr. Mercer's methods is welcome to leave with him." Nobody moved. Silas looked at the men. "You ungrateful sons of—" Clara spoke. "Don't." Silas turned toward her. Her voice was quiet. "You don't get to talk to them that way anymore." The sentence was simple. But Clara felt something inside her change as she said it. Silas stared at her. For 4 years, he had been able to end every disagreement with the same weapon. "You work for me." Now he did not. He looked at the young woman he had ordered around since she was 18. The girl who had carried his water, cooked his meals, cleaned his stable, accepted his insults. He opened his mouth. Perhaps he meant to threaten her, perhaps apologize, perhaps beg. Clara never learned which. Because when Silas looked into her eyes, he stopped. She did not look angry. She did not look triumphant. She simply looked finished with being afraid. "You have until dark," Clara said. Silas lowered his head. He turned toward his trunks. Then Clara remembered something. "Mr. Mercer," he looked back. "The horses belong to the ranch." His mouth tightened. "I know. Take only what is yours." For the first time, Silas seemed to understand the full shape of his defeat. Not because Ethan Hale owned more money, not because armed men stood nearby, but because Clara had become the person deciding what happened next. He nodded once. Understood. Within an hour, Silas Mercer rode out of Double Bar Valley with his personal belongings loaded into a wagon. He never looked back. The next morning, Clara woke before sunrise. For several seconds, she forgot that the small room in the main house was now hers. She had refused the master bedroom. It felt too much like Silas. Instead, she chose a simple room facing east. When morning light appeared, Clara dressed and walked to the stable. Ethan was already there. His injured arm remained in the sling. He was attempting to saddle his black stallion with one hand. Clara watched for several seconds. "You know there are people you can ask for help." Ethan looked over. "So I've been told." "You're doing that badly. I was doing fine before you arrived." "The saddle is backward." Ethan looked at the saddle, then at Clara. "No, it isn't." Clara smiled. "I know." He stared at her. She laughed. Ethan shook his head. "That's cruel." "You'll survive." "Your compassion lasted exactly one night." Apparently. It was the first morning in years that Clara laughed before breakfast. The weeks that followed were harder than she expected. Owning a ranch did not magically make a person capable of running one. Ethan brought in an experienced cattle manager named Benjamin Cole, a 60-year-old rancher from Colorado who had lost his own property years earlier but had never lost his knowledge. Benjamin did not treat Clara gently. On the first day, he handed her 3 ledgers. "Tell me what we're spending on winter feed." Clara opened the first book. "I don't know." "Then find out." On the second day, he made her inspect every water source on the property. On the third, he took her through payroll, then breeding records, veterinary costs, rail shipping prices, fence maintenance, land taxes, contracts. Clara worked from before sunrise until after dark. But the work felt different now. She was building something instead of merely surviving inside someone else's rules. She increased wages slightly, not enough to destroy the ranch's finances, despite Wade's old claims. She repaired the bunkhouse roof. She ordered 2 additional water tanks. She created a rule that every worker injured on ranch property received food and lodging until he could safely travel. She hired Caleb Price back after he gave a full statement to Deputy Foster. Caleb was surprised. "I helped Wade stop you on the road." Clara looked at him. "You did. You could have had me arrested." "I could have. Why didn't you?" "Because you told the truth when it mattered." Caleb lowered his eyes. "Late?" "Yes." Clara waited. "Don't make it late next time." He nodded. "I won't." Wade Brannon was eventually charged with assault, attempted theft, and participation in the cattle theft operation. Several of Silas's outside riders were arrested as well. Silas himself left New Mexico territory before federal authorities could question him fully. Ethan told Clara he would probably end up somewhere west of Arizona, telling anyone who listened that powerful businessmen had stolen his ranch. Clara surprised herself by not caring. She was too busy. Nearly a month after the night in the stable, clouds gathered over Red Mesa Valley. At first, nobody believed they would bring rain. Too many storms had disappeared before reaching the ranch. Then, thunder rolled across the hills. A ranch hand shouted from the corral. Clara stepped onto the porch. A cold drop struck her cheek. Then another. Within minutes, rain fell across Double Bar. Men came out of the bunkhouse laughing. Some removed their hats. Benjamin Cole stood in the yard looking upward, as if he had just received a personal gift from heaven. The hard earth darkened. Dust disappeared. Water ran from the roofs. Clara leaned against the porch railing. For the first time in months, the air smelled clean. Ethan came through the front door carrying 2 cups of coffee. His left arm was no longer in the sling, though he still moved it carefully. He handed her 1 cup. "You look pleased." "It's raining," I noticed. "You don't understand. I've encountered rain before." Clara gave him a look. He smiled. They stood in silence. Across the valley, dry grass bent beneath the water. Within days, faint green shoots would begin appearing. Within weeks, cattle would have better grazing. The drought was not magically erased, but the valley had been given another chance. Just like the ranch. Just like Clara. Ethan looked toward the pasture. "The herd looks stronger. Benjamin says we still need to sell 30 head before winter." "He's probably right." "I know." Clara sipped her coffee. "I hate when he's right." "Then you hired the correct man." Clara looked at Ethan. His carriage was packed. 2 horses waited in front of it. "You really are leaving?" "I have a railroad company that has survived almost 5 weeks without me." "That sounds dangerous." "For them or for me?" "Both." Ethan smiled. "I need to return to Denver." Clara felt an unexpected ache. She had grown accustomed to seeing him at breakfast, hearing him argue with Benjamin over freight prices, finding him at the dining table surrounded by contracts, watching him struggle to button his cuff one-handed and refuse assistance until frustration defeated his pride. She did not say any of that. Instead, she asked, "When will you come back?" Ethan looked at her. "Is that an invitation?" "It's a business question." "Of course." His smile became wider. "Probably spring." "That's a long time." "The railroad between here and Denver doesn't move as quickly as I would like." "Then perhaps you should speak to the owner." "I hear he's difficult." Clara laughed. Ethan reached into his coat. He handed her a leather folder. "The final papers." Clara looked down. "The deed and the partnership agreement." Her name appeared on the first page. Clara Whitmore, not employee, not orphan, not hired girl. Owner. Her throat tightened. Ethan watched her. "The bank will not interfere unless you violate terms that Benjamin assures me you'd have to work very hard to violate." Clara smiled faintly. "I'll try to behave." "I doubt that." She closed the folder. "Ethan?" "Yes?" "Thank you." He became serious. "You don't owe me thanks." "I think I do." "No." He looked toward the rain. "My father lived long enough to see his business become something he never imagined." Ethan paused. "He watched me grow up. He taught me everything I know." His eyes returned to Clara. "None of that happens if your grandfather follows an order and leaves a wagon behind in the snow." Clara touched the silver locket through her dress. Ethan continued. "And I don't make it off Double Bar alive if you follow Mercer's order." His voice softened. "Some debts shouldn't be measured in dollars." Clara looked down. "I still think the ranch is too much." "Then make it worth something." She met his gaze. "How?" "Run it differently." He gestured toward the workers laughing in the rain. "Give people a reason to believe power doesn't have to make a person cruel." Clara thought about Silas, about Wade, about the stable. She nodded. "I can try." "That's all anyone can do." Ethan walked down the porch steps. His driver opened the carriage door. Before getting inside, Ethan turned. "If you need money, wire me." Clara nodded. "If you need cattle, wire me." "All right." "If you need legal help, wire me." "Yes, if you need advice." "Ethan." He stopped. Clara smiled. "I know how a telegram works." "Good." He touched the brim of his hat. "And if you don't need anything but would like to talk to a stubborn railroad man, you can wire me for that too." Clara's smile softened. "I'll remember." Ethan entered the carriage. The driver snapped the reins. The wheels rolled across the wet road. Clara remained on the porch. Ethan looked through the window until the house became smaller behind him. He saw Clara standing straight beneath the porch roof. She looked nothing like the frightened young woman who had been ordered out of the stable. She was still wearing a simple dress, still had work-worn hands, still carried more responsibility than wealth could easily solve. But she stood on her own land. The rain continued falling. When the carriage disappeared beyond the cottonwoods, Clara reached into her pocket. She removed the tarnished silver locket. She opened it. Her grandfather's faded photograph remained inside. Beside the locket in her palm rested Samuel Hale's old wooden pipe. 2 objects, 2 families. One act of mercy connecting them across years. Clara remembered something Thomas Whitmore had told her when she was a child. They had once passed a wealthy rancher's house outside Santa Fe. Clara, perhaps 9 years old, had stared through the wagon window at the large house and said, "He must be the richest man in New Mexico." Her grandfather had smiled. "Maybe." Clara had looked at him. "You don't think so?" Thomas had pointed toward an old woman selling bread beside the road. Earlier that day, Clara had watched the woman give a loaf to a hungry boy who could not pay. "That woman may be richer." Clara had laughed. "She doesn't even have a house like that." Thomas nodded. "That's because you're counting the wrong things." At 9 years old, Clara had not understood. Now she did. Wealth was not measured only by acres, not by cattle, not by railroad shares, not by the weight of coins in a safe. Real wealth sometimes appeared in quiet moments when nobody important was watching. It appeared when kindness cost something, when mercy demanded courage, when a frightened young woman with no money and no family decided that a stranger's life mattered more than her job. It appeared years later when a soldier ignored an order because wounded men had been left behind. Thomas Whitmore never knew that one decision would allow Samuel Hale to survive. He never knew Samuel would build a company. Never knew Samuel would have a son named Ethan. Never knew Ethan would one day crawl wounded and bleeding onto the same land where Thomas's granddaughter was struggling to survive. Thomas never saw Clara kneel beside that stranger. He never saw Ethan return. He never saw Double Bar become hers, but his choice had traveled farther than he ever could have imagined. So had hers. Clara closed the locket. The rain became heavier. Water poured from the porch roof and formed small streams through the ranch yard. The door behind her stood open. For 4 years that door had belonged to Silas Mercer. Clara had entered through it only when summoned. Now, it was her door, her house, her responsibility. She could have closed it against the cold. Instead, Clara left it open. Warm lamplight spilled across the porch. A ranch hand ran toward the house through the rain.
Miss Whitmore.
Clara turned. What happened? Rider coming from the South Road. One of ours? Don't think so. The man pointed. Clara looked across the yard. A lone rider approached slowly. His horse appeared exhausted. The rider leaned forward over the saddle. For one brief second, Clara was back in the stable. A wounded stranger. A cold night. A decision. She put the locket into her pocket. Get Benjamin. The ranch hand nodded. And heat water. Yes, ma'am. Bring clean blankets to the stable. The man turned to run. Clara stopped him. Henry. He looked back. Make sure there's food ready. He smiled. Already figured you'd say that. Clara watched him hurry away. Then she stepped off the porch and walked into the rain. The rider reached the gate. He looked weak, frightened, poor. Clara did not ask his name first. She did not ask whether he had money. She did not ask what trouble followed him. She reached for his horse's reins. You're safe here. The man's tired eyes lifted toward her. Clara looked past him at the open road. Somewhere beyond the hills, Ethan Hale's carriage was carrying him toward Red Mesa. Beyond that lay railroads, cities, money, power. But here on a ranch, once ruled by fear, Clara Whitmore was building something different. Not because she had become wealthy overnight, not because someone powerful had chosen her, but because the hardest thing she had ever lost had taught her what kind of person she refused to become. The storm moved east across the valley. The drought began to break. And beneath the warm light of the Double Bar stable, another stranger was given water before anyone asked what he could offer in return.